One of the oldest museum buildings in the United States is located in Southeast. It's in Sitka, and its collection is primarily the work of one man. Reverend Sheldon Jackson, in the early days, traveled throughout much of the wilderness in Southeast Alaska, but he did most of his collecting among the northern Alaska cultures. Today, the Eskimo mask and basket collection is one of the museum's strongest attractions. Purchased above the harbor just out of town, this small building might go unnoticed if not for its unique architecture. Sharing the Sheldon Jackson College with such grand-looking halls as Fraser, Whitmore, and Stevens, this Hudson Bay octagon also has a specific intent which sets it aside from the other buildings on campus. This concrete structure was built specifically to store the native history of Alaska in the form of its people's material possessions. At one time called the largest collection of Alaskan curiosities in existence, these articles are now regarded as a superb ethnological record. This museum is named for the man whose collecting interests brought about its construction, Dr. Sheldon Jackson. Dr. Jackson began his collection of Alaskan curiosities in 1877. By 1889, while serving as Alaska's first Commissioner of Education, Jackson's collections had grown to the point that a frame building was constructed to house them. Resembling the old-style native houses, the original structure was quickly overflowing with numerous acquisitions donated by Jackson and others. In 1895, a Boston architect was hired to build a new, larger structure which would be more appropriate to house such a significant collection. To meet Sheldon Jackson's requirements, Alaska's first concrete building was erected. At the time, the local natives who helped with the construction were amazed by the Boston architect's ability to mix sand and water and, as they said, make stone. Besides being a first in Alaska's architecture, this museum carries other honors. Curator of Collections and Exhibits, Peter Corey.
I have a suspicion that this museum is one of the 10 or 12 oldest museums in the United States. It's the oldest museum in the state of Alaska. By oldest, I mean oldest museum that is still functioning today. There were museums that were started a lot earlier. I understand there was a museum in Kodiak very early that went defunct. But I think nationwide, this is one of the 10 or 12 oldest museums in the United States. And I think one of the very interesting things is that this building has been a museum for its entire existence. Even during the Second World War, when there was a large military presence here in town, this building was not commandeered for other purposes. And so for its entire history, this place has been a museum.
Although Sitka was Dr. Jackson's home base for his Alaskan wanderings, most of his acquisitions came from further north, where he spent his summers cruising the southwest coastline on the U.S. revenue cutter Bear.
We're not a large collection, but we are a very fine collection because of the amount of documentation that goes along with it. For example, as you walk around and look at various things, you'll see written right on the sides, Arctic Ocean, presented by Sheldon Jackson, 1893. So we have all of this documentation as to where he got it and what year he got it. In some cases, we have specifics of what village it came from.
Because of Sheldon Jackson's emphasis on northern cultures, the collection of Eskimo baskets at the museum is one of the best in Alaska. These baskets express some of the finest handicraft of the Eskimo women.
There are actually 3 techniques used in Eskimo basketry. There's twining, and then there's coiling, and then there's, we have several baskets that are made of braided strands which were then sewn together. That's the more unusual of the 3. Basically, the material is grass, beach grass or ryegrass, which is gotten at several different times a year depending upon what the use is. And then we also have baskets made out of baleen. Baleen basketry is, in a cultural spectrum, relatively new, probably introduced about the turn of the century by Charles Brower into the Barrow community. The baskets that you see in those cases were mostly used for either carrying or storing of materials in the home, everything from food materials to personal items. Sometimes it was clothing. The baskets that were collected by Sheldon Jackson show very little color. any sort of decoration was usually by the addition of some non-grass material. It could be the skin from the legs of birds, or pieces of fur, or dyed seal intestine would be used. But it was in the 19-teens and 1920s that they began to use a lot of dyed material. Some of it was natural dyes, some of it was, they would take crepe paper and boil it to take the color out of it, or carbon paper or Hershey bar wrappers, and just boil them and get the color out, and then put their grass in there. But some of the early things were not mordanted well. That is, there wasn't something put in there to fix the color, and so the colors are quite fugitive.
Although it's hard to pick out one specific collection in the Sheldon Jackson Museum which stands above the others, the Eskimo mask collection definitely catches your imagination.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot known about Eskimo mask ceremonialism. It was heavily affected by outsiders coming in. Unfortunately, at the time these were collected, Sheldon Jackson didn't get all of the specifics as to what it exactly referred to, and what the spirits were, and how it was used in Eskimo ceremonialism. But the number and the differences in the mask would certainly give the indication that these people had a very highly developed ceremonial concept and understanding or belief in a spirit world, and the efficacy of a spirit world interjecting itself into the real world. And I think those are one of the things that I would like people to think about most, is that these things were made with a very rich and wide background behind them.
In 1985, the Sheldon Jackson Museum changed ownership and went through another major reconstruction phase. Acquired by the Alaska State Museum with stipulations requiring immediate improvements, the museum received a new wing and the historic building was renovated. This helped to increase display areas and allowed space for community and other educational activities.
Well, there are many things that have improved the building and improved the conditions for the collection. Not only is the staffing increased, but there are invisible improvements like fire protection and a roof that doesn't leak, and we have security measures, security guards, and I think in general the physical facility is much better for the collection. It's safer and better cared for. And also now we can say to a donor, look, if you donate this lovely piece to us, we have a secure collection room, we have temperature and humidity control, and we have security measures, and we'll take the very best care of it, and hopefully we'll do as well as Sheldon Jackson did, since he collected the pieces nearly 100 years ago, and they're still here in fine condition.